My son-in-law thought he was the smartest man in any room he walked into. He had the degrees to prove it, 2 of them, framed and hanging in his home office, where he made sure every visitor could see them. What he did not have was any idea that the man he called Pop had been watching him the way a poker player watches someone who bets too soon. My name is Wendell. I am 67 years old. For 38 years, I ran a small engine repair shop in Knoxville, Tennessee. Lawnmowers, generators, outboard motors, chainsaws. If it had a pull cord or a carburetor, I could fix it. My wife Edna started the business with me in 1986. We rented a little bay on Magnolia Avenue with a hand-painted sign and 2 used toolboxes between us. By the time she passed from a stroke 6 years ago, we owned the building, the lot behind it, 2 rental houses on the same block, and a piece of commercial property on the edge of town that had tripled in value since we bought it. None of that was visible from the outside. The shop still had the same hand-painted sign. I still wore the same kind of work boots. I drove a 2009 Ford F-150 with a cracked side mirror I kept meaning to replace. Edna used to laugh at that truck. She said, "Wendell, you could buy a new one every year and still have money left over. Why do you drive around looking like you can't afford lunch?" I told her I liked that truck. The truth was, I liked what it represented. Nobody bothered a man who looked like he was getting by. Nobody tried to take anything from a man who looked like he had nothing worth taking. I did not know how right I was until my daughter brought home the man she wanted to marry. Her name is Lily. She is 31. She has her mother's eyes and her mother's laugh, and as it turned out, her mother's instinct for trusting people who do not deserve it. She met him at a conference in Nashville. He was a financial consultant, which is a title that means different things depending on who says it. The way he said it, leaning back in his chair with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up, it meant he expected you to be impressed. His name was Sutton. He drove a leased BMW and had a firm handshake that lasted about 2 seconds longer than it needed to. The first time Lily brought him to the shop, he looked around the way a man looks at a garage sale, taking inventory, not of what was there, but of what it might be worth. He asked how long I had been in business. I told him. He asked if I owned or leased the space. I told him I owned the building. His eyes moved to the lot out back. He asked what I planned to do with the property eventually. I told him I had not thought much about it. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they are thinking hard but want you to think they are relaxed. I smiled and offered him a sweet tea. Lily and Sutton got engaged 8 months later. The wedding was in April, outdoor ceremony at a venue about 40 minutes east of town. Nice place with a covered pavilion and string lights. I paid for most of it. Sutton's parents contributed a few thousand from out in Phoenix. His father was a retired insurance adjuster. His mother sold real estate part-time. They were pleasant people at the wedding. Normal people. I wondered sometimes if they knew what their son was. At the reception, after the first dance, Sutton found me near the bar. He put his hand on my shoulder the way men do when they want to seem casual, but have something specific in mind. He said the shop must be a lot to manage alone since Edna passed. He said Lily worried about me. He said he had experience in small business valuation, and if I ever wanted a second set of eyes on the finances, he was happy to help. Family helping family. I told him that was very kind. I told him I was doing fine. He smiled and said, of course, no rush, just an open offer. I watched him walk back to my daughter. He put his arm around her and she leaned into him, and I stood there with my sweet tea and thought about the way he had said the word valuation. 6 weeks after the wedding, my son-in-law came to the shop on a Tuesday. Not a call first, just showed up around 2 in the afternoon while I was pulling a carburetor on a riding mower. He sat down on a stool near the workbench and watched me work for a few minutes without saying anything. Then he said he had been running some numbers. I kept my eyes on the carburetor. I said, "What kind of numbers?" He said he had looked at property values in that part of Knoxville. He said the commercial real estate market was moving fast. He said if I was willing to consider liquidating, I could walk away with enough to retire very comfortably. Travel, not worry about the heat in the summer and the slow months in winter. I set down the carburetor. I asked him what he meant by liquidating. He said, the shop, the building, the lot out back, maybe the rental houses too if you're open to it. Lily and I could handle the sale. We'd make sure you got a fair price and we'd help manage the proceeds. That's what I do, Pop. I know how to make money work. I looked at my son-in-law. I said I would think about it. He nodded like that was the answer he expected. He said to take my time. He left without asking about the mower. That night I sat in the kitchen, where Edna and I used to eat breakfast every morning. Same yellow curtains she hung 20 years ago. Same chip in the corner of the table, where I dropped a pipe wrench in 1997 and never got around to fixing it. I thought about what Sutton had said. Then I thought about what Edna had told me 2 weeks before she died, when she still had her voice but most of her strength was already gone. She said, "Wendell, whatever happens, don't let someone else decide what we built is worth. You know its value better than any number on a paper." I had promised her. I called my attorney the next morning. His name is Douglas. He has handled my affairs for 15 years. I told him about the conversation with Sutton. He said the trust documents were solid, same as we had set them up after Edna died. The shop, the real estate, all of it in a revocable living trust with me as sole trustee. Lily was named as contingent beneficiary but had no current authority over anything. Sutton had no legal standing whatsoever. Douglas said, "You want me to do anything?" I said, "Not yet. I want to see how far he goes." He went further than I expected. Over the next 2 months, Sutton started showing up at the shop more often, sometimes with Lily, sometimes alone. He asked to see the books. I showed him the operating accounts, the ones that showed a modest income for a small repair shop, enough to explain why I was still working at 67, not enough to suggest anything worth chasing. I did not show him the property records. I did not mention the investment account Edna I had been quietly building since the early 90s, which by that point had grown to something that would have changed his whole approach. I did introduce some small inconsistencies into what I showed him. A couple of double entries in the supply ledger, a deposit that appeared to be logged twice. Nothing dramatic, just enough to suggest that an old man with reading glasses might be losing track of things. I wanted to see what he would do with it. In October, Sutton and Lily came to the house together on a Sunday after church. Lily had made a pie, which told me she was nervous about something. She only bakes when she cannot figure out what else to do with her hands. They sat at the kitchen table, and Sutton put a folder down in front of me. He said he had been going over the records I had shared. He said he had found some discrepancies. He said it was nothing to be embarrassed about. These things happened, especially when a person was managing everything alone and getting older. Lily reached across the table and put her hand on mine. She said she was worried. She said she had noticed I seemed tired lately. I had not seemed tired. I had been sleeping fine. Sutton opened the folder. He pointed to the double entries I had planted. He used words like cognitive load and financial exposure and risk of error compounding over time. He said he had spoken with a colleague who specialized in elder financial planning, and the recommendation was to get some support in place before something went wrong. I looked at my daughter. She was watching me with an expression I had not seen since she was a child, and thought she had broken something. I said, "What kind of support are you suggesting?" Sutton says it would be simplest to set up a power of attorney so that he and Lily could step in if needed. Just a safeguard. Nothing would change day to day unless I needed help. Lily said, "We love you, Dad. We just want to make sure you're protected." I said I appreciated that. I said I would think it over. Sutton's shoulders relaxed slightly. He had expected more resistance. I asked if they wanted coffee. 3 weeks later, Sutton called me on a Thursday evening. He said he had taken the liberty of having the power of attorney documents drafted. He said his colleague, a woman named Paula, who was a notary, could come by Saturday morning if that was convenient. He said there was no pressure. They just wanted to have everything ready when I was. I said Saturday morning was fine. I called Douglas that night. I told him what was coming. He said he would be available by phone if I needed him. I said I did not think I would need him on the phone. I had everything I needed right there in my house. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. I have known that for years, for reasons that had nothing to do with Sutton. When you run a business long enough, you learn the laws of the place you live in. I had a small digital recorder I had used for years to record estimates and parts orders, so I would not have to write everything down. I had been using it more deliberately for the past 2 months. Saturday morning, Sutton arrived at 9 with Paula. She had a leather portfolio and a professional smile. Lily was with them. She brought a coffee cake, which meant she was nervous again. We sat at the kitchen table. Paula laid out the documents. Sutton explained them in the broad, reassuring way he had, the tone that was meant to make you feel like the details did not matter, that the overall intention was all that counted. I picked up the first page and started reading. Sutton said, "Pop, I can walk you through the highlights. It's pretty standard language." I said, "I like to read things myself. Edna always said never sign anything you haven't read twice." Sutton laughed, a little too quickly. He said, "Of course, take all the time I needed." I read for about 4 minutes. The power of attorney was general and durable. It covered financial decisions, property transactions, business operations. If I signed it, Sutton and Lily would have the legal authority to sell every piece of property I owned, access every account, make every decision on my behalf. Paula sat with her stamp. The coffee cake sat untouched. I set the papers down. I said, "I'm going to have Douglas look these over before I sign anything." Sutton's expression shifted, not dramatically, a small tightening around the eyes. He said that seemed unnecessary for something this straightforward. He said Douglas would just charge me for time I did not need to spend. I said Douglas was worth every penny. Lily said, "Dad, we're not trying to take anything from you. We're trying to protect you." I said I knew that. I said I still wanted Douglas to look at it. Sutton gathered the papers from the table without being asked to. He said they could revisit this another time. Paula closed her portfolio. Nobody touched the coffee cake. After they left, I washed the cups and stood at the kitchen window for a while. A neighbor was raking leaves next door. The same red maple Edna had loved was dropping the last of them. I picked up the phone and called Douglas. I said, "I think it's time." He knew what I meant. We had talked about this contingency 3 weeks earlier. The following Saturday, I called Lily and told her I wanted to have dinner. I said I had been thinking seriously, and I had some things I wanted to share with both of them. Lily sounded relieved. I heard her tell Sutton in the background. I heard something in his voice, a small lift, the sound of a man who thinks he has just won. They came at 6. I had made pot roast, Edna's recipe, the one she made every Sunday for 30 years. The kitchen smelled the way it used to. I set the table with the good dishes, the ones we kept for company. We ate most of the meal with ordinary conversation. Lily talked about a project at her job. Sutton talked about a client in Atlanta. I asked questions and listened and kept the coffee warm. After the dishes were cleared, I set a folder on the table. I said, "Before we talk about next steps, there are some things I should have told you both a long time ago." Sutton straightened slightly. Lily looked at the folder. I opened it. I said, "When you looked at the shop's books, you found some errors, ledger mistakes, deposits that didn't line up." Sutton started to say something. I held up one hand. I said, "I put those there. I wanted to know what you would do with them, and now I know." The room was quiet. I spread the documents across the table. Property records, account statements, the trust document with Douglas's letterhead across the top. I said, "Edna didn't just leave me the shop. She left me the building, the lot, the 2 rental houses on Magnolia, and the commercial parcel on the east side of town. Everything is held in a revocable trust with me as sole trustee." I looked at my son-in-law. "You are not mentioned anywhere in these documents." Sutton looked at the balance sheet. I watched his eyes move across the numbers, the rental income, the property valuations, the investment account total. He said very quietly, "That can't be right." I said, "The books you saw were what I wanted you to see. I have been running a business for 38 years. I know how to keep more than one set of records." Lily's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. She said, "Dad," I said, "let me finish." I pulled out my phone. I set it on the table. I said, "Tennessee is a one-party consent state. I have recordings of conversations where Sutton coached you on how to present the cognitive decline argument. Recordings of him telling you which errors to point out and how to frame them. Recordings of the call he made to Paula before Saturday." Sutton said, "Those recordings aren't admissible in." I said, "Douglas says otherwise. But more importantly, they are very clear, very specific." I looked at him. "Would you like to hear one?" He said nothing. I closed the folder. I said, "Here is what is going to happen. You are not going to pursue any power of attorney. You are not going to contact Douglas with any concerns about my cognitive health. You are not going to approach any financial institution, any property manager, or any court on my behalf or in relation to my estate. If you do any of those things, Douglas will file for a restraining order, and the recordings will become part of a public court record." Lily said, "Dad, I didn't know he was." I looked at my daughter. I said, "Lily, you brought him the pie." Her eyes filled up. She understood what I meant. She had known more than she wanted to admit. Sutton pushed back from the table. He said this was an overreaction. He said he had been trying to help. He said I was going to be alone in this house getting older, and someone needed to think about practicalities. I said, "I have been thinking about practicalities since before you were born. I kept this business alive through 2008 and through the pandemic, and through 16 months after Edna died, when I was not sure I wanted to keep going at all. I don't need your help with practicalities." I stood up. I said, "I changed my estate documents last week. The shop and all associated properties will go to the East Tennessee Small Business Preservation Fund if I pass before making other arrangements. It's a foundation that helps working-class families start trades businesses. Edna would have liked that." Sutton stood. He said, "You can't just." I said, "I already did. Douglas filed everything on Wednesday." I walked to the front door and opened it. Sutton walked out without another word. Lily stopped at the door. She was crying and not trying to hide it. She said, "Dad, I'm sorry, I thought." She stopped. She said, "I don't know what I thought." I said, "I know." I said, "Go home, Lily. Come see me when you're ready to talk." She nodded. She left. I closed the door and stood in the hallway for a while. The house was quiet the way it gets at the end of a long day. I walked back to the kitchen and sat down in Edna's chair, the one with the cushion she picked out, the one I have not been able to throw away. I said out loud, to no one and to her, "I kept my word, Ed. Nobody took anything. That was 7 months ago." Sutton and Lily separated in February. She told me he had started showing the same patterns with her finances that he had shown with mine. Small redirects, suggestions about joint accounts, questions about what she would do if she lost her job. Once she started seizing it, she said she could not stop seeing it. She filed the paperwork in March. He did not contest much. There was not much to contest. Lily came back to the shop in April for the first time since that dinner. She showed up on a Wednesday afternoon and sat on the same stool Sutton had used when he came to talk about liquidating. She did not say anything for a few minutes. She watched me work on a generator that had come in from a hardware store up the road. Then she said, "I should have listened to my gut about him." I said, "You were in love." She said, "I was stupid." I said, "Those two things can happen at the same time." She almost smiled. She asked if she could hand me tools. I said she could. She has been coming in on Wednesday afternoons since then. She doesn't know a flathead from a Phillips, but she's learning, and she asks good questions, and sometimes she stands in the doorway of the shop looking at the walls and the shelves, and the equipment the way her mother used to, like she is starting to understand what it is she is standing in. I have not changed the estate documents back yet. The foundation is still the named beneficiary. But I have scheduled a meeting with Douglas for next month. Lily will be there. We are going to talk about what a real partnership looks like, the kind built on trust and honest conversation, not on a folder of planted errors and a notary on standby. I still drive the same truck. The cracked mirror is still there. I keep meaning to fix it. Maybe I'll leave it. Some things are worth keeping exactly as they are.